The smoke hung thick in the air, curling around the fire engine's red lights like ghostly fingers as Ethan Carter and his partner, Maya Lopez, sped down the highway. The wildfire was moving faster than anyone had anticipated, devouring everything in its path: homes, cars, memories. Dispatch crackled in their ears, relaying yet another evacuation call. 102 Maple Street, the voice said, elderly woman refusing to leave the premises. Ethan clenched his jaw, gripping the wheel tighter. He had been through this before. People who wouldn't leave, people who thought they had more time than they did. The truth was, the fire didn't care about promises, about memories. It took everything. "Let's hope she listens," Maya murmured, adjusting her helmet. They pulled up to the small white house, now barely visible under the thickening smoke. It stood stubbornly amid the chaos, shutters closed, curtains drawn, as if willing the fire to pass it by. Ethan and Maya jumped out, pulling their masks down and running up the front porch steps. He banged on the door. "Ma'am! Fire department! You need to evacuate now!" The door creaked open, and there she stood, Margaret Holden. She was frail, wrapped in a knitted shawl, and her eyes, soft but determined, locked onto Ethan's with a quiet resolve. In her hands she clutched an old wedding photo, its edges worn and curling from years of love and loss. "I'm not leaving," she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in it. "This house, it's all I have left." Ethan exchanged a glance with Maya. He could already hear the distant roar of flames, feel the heat creeping closer with every passing second. "Ma'am, I understand this is your home, but it's not safe anymore. The fire is coming fast." Margaret shook her head. "I made a promise," she whispered, her fingers tracing the faces in the photo. "My husband, God rest his soul. We built this place together. I told him I'd never leave it." Ethan knelt in front of her, his eyes searching hers. "Margaret," he said gently, using her name, hoping it would make her listen. "I know how much this place means to you, but your husband wouldn't want you to risk your life for it." She gave a small, sad smile. "You didn't know him," she replied. "He would understand." Maya stepped in, her voice urgent but kind. "We can take the picture with us. You don't have to lose everything, but we need to go. Now." Margaret's eyes drifted to the framed photo, holding it like it was the only thing keeping her standing. She looked out the window at the approaching orange glow, and for a moment, Ethan thought she might agree. He could see the struggle on her face, the war between love and survival. But then, she straightened her frail shoulders and shook her head. "No, I belong here." Ethan sighed, running a hand through his soot-covered hair. "Ma'am, if we leave now, we promise we'll come back if it gets worse. We won't let you stay here alone if the fire gets too close." Margaret studied him, the photo clutched tighter to her chest, and after what felt like an eternity, she nodded. "You promise?" Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat. "I promise." Reluctantly, they left. As they drove off, Ethan looked back in the mirror, watching Margaret's silhouette standing in the doorway, the fire creeping closer behind her. Hours passed. The wildfire jumped containment lines, growing into an unstoppable monster. Ethan and Maya were sent from one emergency to another, evacuating families, tending to injuries, and all the while, Ethan's mind kept drifting back to 102 Maple Street. "We should go back," he finally said, his gut twisting. "We need to get her out of there." Maya didn't argue. They turned the rig around and pushed back toward the neighborhood, but when they arrived, it was too late. Margaret's house was gone. The flames had consumed it completely, reducing the once cozy home to smoldering rubble. Ethan stood frozen, staring at the charred remains, his heart sinking deep into his stomach. They had promised her. He had promised her. They searched through the debris, calling her name, but there was nothing. No trace of Margaret Holden, no sign she had ever been there, just ashes and silence. Maya touched his arm gently. "Ethan, we did what we could." He shook his head. "Did we?" The weight of guilt pressed down on him, suffocating. He had seen so much loss in his career, but this felt different. The next morning, as the firefighters sifted through the ruins, Ethan found something that made his blood run cold. Sitting atop a pile of ash where the front door used to be was Margaret's wedding ring. It was untouched by the flames, placed neatly, as if someone had left it there for them to find. Ethan stared at it, his mind racing. Margaret wouldn't have taken it off. She said she wouldn't leave. But here it was, gleaming in the morning sun, impossibly out of place amid the destruction. Maya stepped beside him, her voice barely a whisper. "Do you think someone got her out?" Ethan didn't have an answer. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He kept seeing Margaret's face in the flickering shadows of the fire, hearing her voice whispering, "I belong here." He drove back to the lot where her house once stood, staring into the darkness, and just for a second, he thought he saw something, a figure, a shadow, standing where the doorway used to be, watching, waiting. Then it was gone. He swallowed hard and walked to where they had found the ring. Placing it gently in his palm, he whispered, "I'm sorry, Margaret." The wind picked up, carrying the faintest scent of lavender, Margaret's scent, through the air, and for a moment he thought he heard her voice again, soft and distant. "Thank you for keeping your promise." Ethan left the ring on the doorstep of a local shelter, a place where others who had lost everything could find solace. Maybe Margaret couldn't be saved, but someone else could. Back at the firehouse, Ethan and Maya sat in silence, the weight of the night pressing down on them. "We did what we could," Maya said again, quieter this time. Ethan nodded, but deep down, he knew that Margaret Holden's story would stay with him forever. Some people leave their homes, but some become a part of them. And some promises, it seemed, were meant to be kept, even after the fire had taken everything else.